Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is the part where I usually say that it's been a while and I've been busy with other projects, but I'm fairly sure that this video is going to come out relatively close to the previous video. Compared to other releases, relatively close means about 2 weeks. Now, I know, I really am trying to do about one video a week, but the editing and recordings are killing me because I really don't feel like editing voiceovers on a constant basis. I also need to find a time when the house is empty in order to actually make the recordings. So, you know the drill, right? Before we move on to more discussions about my process, let me explain what I'm doing with the mini. I'm painting the winged Tyranid Prime. I decided to do a single model because I want to make another video soon and get it finished, and of course I failed at that because it still took like almost 3 weeks. I really like the way it came out, but it was longer than I actually wanted. I'm following the same formula I used for the rest of the army, so all of the fleshy bits are painted with aethermatic blue, followed by a wash of aethermatic blue mixed with a bit of Dragonov Nightshade. I only apply this in like the recesses to add depth and shade all of the fleshy parts. What will be different this time is that this specific Tyranid has wings, and I wanted those to really stand out. So, using the same color scheme as the other Tyranids, I made the wings pop out because of that aethermatic blue. I really hope this works, and it might not be to everyone's liking, but this is the way the color scheme for the Tyranids go. And I didn't really think about the wings at the moment I chose. But now back to my rant about video editing and why I'm trying to do things a certain way. For this video, I want to improve the quality of my voice recording. It will probably take a few takes as well as some script editing, because this is what I really hate and what I ended up doing anyway. Which is why I initially took a rough script by doing the voiceovers in the usual way, by recording one voiceover and then rereading the script to create a better, more polished version. Hopefully, I will also achieve the better synchronization with what's on the screen. Currently, I do my voiceovers over the video playback and then import everything back into the editing software. I then tweak it and remove all of the pauses or the slurring of words for quality, which isn't very pleasant because I'm talking and recording based on what I am doing on screen, and this sometimes causes the audio to fall out of sync with the video after the cuts are made. That's what I'm trying to improve now. Hopefully, this time the quality will be much better. Now, I'm also gonna see if I can make all of the pauses and the slurred words or the uhs and oohs be silent. Let's see if I can get that going. Now I'm getting ready to start on the wings and specifically their fleshy parts. I'm using a small brush to ensure I don't go over the white parts. Recently, there was a video by Squidmark where he criticized the contrast painting method, saying that contrast paints can stain and are difficult to fix if you mess up. However, many people get this wrong. Contrast paints are incredibly effective with the slap chop method, which is to say, priming black, then dry brushing with white, and then applying the contrast paint, generating shadows, midtones, and highlights all in one. The contrast paints flow well into the recesses, creating shadows naturally, and are highlighted from the underneath by the white areas made through the dry brush process. The way I do it is by using contrast over a completely white primed model, which was the initial original intention behind the design of contrast paint. You can let the contrast paint settle into the crevices, making them very dark without the use of the black primer. This has been my experience so far with most of these contrast paints as well. If needed, you can always come in with a shade to deepen those shadows. I believe many don't fully understand this, and I don't know why mixing shades isn't more common. Everyone mixes different shades or layers to achieve a particular color, but I rarely see people advocating for mixing contrast paints with shades in order to customize the shadows. For example, I used Dragonov Nightshade mixed with Aethermatic Blue to create a darker shade that is specific to my use on this particular model in the army. This allows me to deepen the shadows while still maintaining the same color. This method aligns with contrast paint's design, allowing the shadows to pool in the recesses and the highlights to be created naturally, so to speak. Painting with contrast over a completely white primed model gives you a good starting point for shading and highlighting with contrast paints. To deepen those shadows, if those were not already covered by just the contrast paint, paint it with a darker shade of the same color and thin it even further with medium. It's similar to traditional painting. However, what is better about this method is that the flow of the shades and the contrast paints are much better and they tend to go where you want them to go. So yes, contrast paints are designed to work best over plain white, but with some mixing you can customize the shades to suit your needs. I also see many recommending to create shadows by mixing the same color with black, but that can change the hue. Instead, I prefer mixing darker shades with the same color that you did the midtones in order to keep the same color consistency. For example, I used 3 drops of achromatic blue with 1 or 2 brushes full of Dragonov Nightshade, then added a lot of contrast medium, and only then did I use this particular mixture into the recesses in order to achieve natural shadows based on the same color placed in the model recesses. I've also been experimenting with newer, for me, techniques and coming up with my own ideas for mixing and matching such colors. Another point I want to mention is about sub-assemblies. I assembled and primed these models, then disassembled them in order to facilitate the painting process. I did this because I was excited to get them built, and I didn't care or knew that much about the painting process at that time. Now, since then, I've learned a bit, and if I keep using just white primer and contrast paints, I will probably prime everything in sub-assemblies from the start. This should make the priming process easier, as well as the painting process, and it will also allow the primer to reach everywhere, because I did have some problems with primer not reaching obscured parts of the miniatures. Now, the hooves and claws were painted with Shaiish purple, and I did the same for this miniature as well as the rest of the army. The claws have like an organic form, a shell-like covering over the base of the larger claws, and I wanted to create a gradient effect on them, especially since they appear to be growing out of their hands. I'll talk about that a bit more when I get to those parts. So what else should I update you on? Next up are the Neurogaunt, the Neurogaunt models. After that, I will be done with the smaller miniatures of the Tyranid army. Once I finish those, I'll move on to the larger models, the Psychophage, the Screamer Killer, and finally the Neuro Tyrant. I want to focus and fast track these because the new Space Wolves box set is coming, and I couldn't help myself. I bought it because, as a big Space Wolves fan, I really want the new models. When the new box arrives, I will definitely drop everything and assemble them and prime them immediately, along with the rest of my already bought Space Wolves and Space Marine miniatures. This ties into my earlier discussions about priming and contrast paints. I want to test the slab chop method on my new Space Wolves army, which is going to be my main army, and it is above 2,000 points right now. So yes, I'm definitely going to try and do a challenge to build a 2000 point army as quickly as possible. And keep in mind, I'm still learning this as I go along. Another thing I really want to point out that this is a hobby for me, not a job. I really want to enjoy the process, not get into it. And I tend to get sidetracked, and I always end up doing a lot of different projects all at once. I'll try to organize my thoughts better during the next recording session in order for me to not go back and forth on matters. What else? I plan to prime the models black, then do a zenithal highlight with gray, then dry brush with white for edge highlights. Only then will I apply the contrast paint in order to have deep shadows and midtones as well as highlights, and hopefully a bit of natural edge highlights, all in the same seamless process. And also it should create an even smoother transition than the classic slab job, which is just dry brushing white over black prime. Now back to the painting of the model. I need to apply the base color, and so I used Magos purple around the fleshy beats, being very careful. I know I spend a lot of time on fine details and instead of getting as much coverage as possible, and I know I shouldn't, but it works for me because I'm very cautious and these paints have a lot of coverage. Usually you would need to apply multiple coats, but I can just get by with one, and this is due to the coverage of the contrast paints. I'm not sure I will be able to apply it on other types of miniatures. If you see some light spots where the primer still shows through the contrast paint, that doesn't really matter. You just need to let it dry, and somehow the paint does still stain those. At worst case, you might need to come back, or as I did, with just another light pass. I've made mistakes like layering or pulling paint onto high areas, which can cause dark spots. The solution is to repaint the affected areas with white or a suitable highlight, then reapply your layers. Now, this is much more difficult when you have an already dry brush layer underneath of your paint, because you have to take the whole process of painting black and dry brushing from the start. If it's just white, then you don't need to bother other than fixing the mistakes with white. This is one of the longest recent videos I've made because I am painting this miniature from start to finish in one go. That's manageable because it's just one mod. For larger squads, it would be a different story. I definitely would have to break them into multiple videos covering the details, the midtones, the highlights, and so on and so forth. Or perhaps, as I did before, specific parts of the miniatures, the chitin, the fleshy bits, the normal Magos purple thingy. The models are tiny, which makes painting challenging, but also quick. After finishing, I'll put them on the board and get ready for gameplay. I know other painters do a much better job, but I enjoy the process and really hope to play in a tournament someday. I haven't played many full games yet, mostly just some casual matches with a friend. Victory points and control weren't our focus. We just like to move models around and make them fight. Once I get this army assembled and painted, I would really like to test them out and see how they perform. I haven't actually played Tyranid yet, so I'm pretty sure and hoping that I find somebody to play at working. There are some colleagues there that are in the hobby, and hopefully I will find somebody who can fight, who can teach me at least the things that I have been missing while getting ready to actually play a game. I started working on the wing articulations, specifically on the articulations that hold the membrane together. I had to be very careful in order not to spill on either side. Before painting the articulations with Magos purple, I did a pass with white because during the painting of the membrane, some of the ethermatic blue spilled over on the articulations themselves. I let it dry before proceeding, the white I mean. So if you spill a little on parts you don't want covered, come back with white to fix it. These tiny details matter because, again, Magos purple is not a very dark color and it does not have the same coverage as Dark Angel's blue. I used a fine brush to control the paint and avoid spilling. I'm proud to say I didn't make any mistakes here. Just a few close calls, but no fixes needed during my painting of the articulations with Magos purple. Painting this part has been a very good experience. I'm getting much better at small and delicate detail. Another positive note, I had no more issues with the primer this time. The large wings and fleshy parts held to the primer well, with absolutely no peeling. I only had to touch up some small spots here and there. Painting over the primer was really straightforward and all the textures look absolutely fantastic once painted. The contours, especially on the rib cage, really stand out after a decent coat of paint. For the main body, I used a larger brush to speed up coverage, especially around the chitinous scales and hard to reach areas. I don't mind making mistakes in this step as long as I stay on the white primer, because, like I mentioned before, Dark Angel's green is a very forgiving contrast color. Because even if you made a mistake with a different color, as long as it's much lighter, you don't need to fix it with white before. As a much darker color, it has very good coverage over almost anything without having to make it white again. Finally, I applied 3 layers of diluted shade purple on the base of the claws, building a gradient from the arm to the base of the claw. I used a heavily diluted shade purple shade made out of about 2 drops of shade purple to roughly 10 drops of contrast medium, and I layered it gradually. I sped up the drying process with a hair dryer because I didn't want to just wait until all of the layers were, you know, completely dry. Then repeated the process to deepen the gradient. The texture really helped out a lot because it made the gradient look seamless and made it stand out because it helps without having to go and blend them while they're wet. The last step was to paint all of the chitinous parts with Dark Angel's green. This is the final step that brings everything together: the colors, the shading, and the details to create my army's cohesive look. I paid great attention to the smallest of details, like getting into every nook and cranny, and even paint the edge of the chitin with green, which is no easy feat for me, as that area is very small, is like 1/10 of a millimeter, and I'm not one to pick on my own tools, but this is a thing that I am struggling to, and I don't really have like the finest brushes, but I have ones that are good enough and that do the job right. One of my biggest challenges is holding painted models while working. Clamps slip and I have to hold the parts in my fingers, risking chipping the paint and even the primer. I was lucky this time with only a few minor paint chippings at the tip of the claws. This is usually common for my models, and they can easily be touched up with a bit of the paint and they will look fine. Certain paints seem to be more prone to chipping, especially around thin parts, but overall I was able to varnish this guy quickly and avoid any major damage to the paint. This approach saved me quite a bit of time. I finished the model in about 6 hours over maybe 2 to 3 days in total, which is pretty good for a single mini. Again, the painting does not really take that long. Editing these videos does take a while. Also, please remember that this footage was sped up and heavily edited to show each step, including most of the touch up and fixes. And I would like to get your opinion on something. What do you think? Do I have any chance of completing the rest of this Tyranid army before my Space Wolves box set arrives and I start to work on the big 2000 point Space Wolf army? Write in the comment your opinion. He has a chance, he has no chance, he has some chances if he gets his shit together and actually moves along with painting miniatures. Hope you enjoyed my attempt to show the painting process more clearly and to keep the action in the center of the screen rather than just having the miniature in the corner. This is because while I am filming my entire work area, I tend to just go left, right, wherever I'm most comfortable with my hands or my back. I am still figuring out the best camera setup and position. I might consider attaching the camera to my head for better control, though that might be somewhat of a disorientating experience as I move quite a lot and I don't even want to imagine the focus on that thing. Once finished, I will do a proper voiceover, especially since I was interrupted by a phone call during the first recording, but seeing as this is my second round and with the script and it has taken so much time, I really hope does well. Finding time to record is tough, but I have to hope that this will turn out well. I am excited to share the final results and to hopefully gain some new subscribers. Anyway, I have an idea I will try next time, and I will let you know in the next video how that turns out. Now, I will leave you with the final shots, for which I used some extra light. Did I just say lightning? No, I meant lighting to highlight some details, and the photos came out fantastic. Shadows are much more natural from the model's own contours, but enough talking from me. Enjoyed the final shots, and I will see you in the next video. Please don't forget to subscribe, share it with a friend, and hit the like button. Thank you all for watching.